As the first stewardship presentation of the year for this year, I would like to invite Larry Gess, Dr. Larry Gess, to talk to us about stewardship. Larry has been the stewardship chairman of this parish, of the ministry of this parish for many years, but he has also been the one who started stewardship in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, believe it or not, 45 years ago. And I remember when he and others put together the program for the Archdiocese. I was a young priest in Fredericksburg, Virginia at the time, and I convinced my parish to adopt stewardship, and we did it. When we did it, we had membership at the time, and it was like $100 a year. As soon as we established stewardship, the income of the parish doubled. And we had enough money to run all the things and do all the good things that the parish was doing. It was a brand new parish. I was the first priest they had. And we did it through the work that Larry and those who worked with him over the years had done. So, Larry, please talk to us about...
Okay, I have notes, but now that Father made his presentation, which I wasn't aware of, and the things he just said, I'm going to have to depart entirely, and I will not cover everything I'm possibly going to say. So let me tell you, there will be eventually a presentation that is parallel to this, only longer, that will be on our website. And for those who are interested in the true meaning of stewardship, as opposed to the current meaning you understand, it'll be available there, and you will receive an email when it is. And you may want to look at that. What I'll do is off the top of my head explain to you how this came about. But first, I want to say how excited I am to be here. This is the first Sunday I have been here in church since March. Now, I've been to many, and so has Mickey, many divine liturgies, but they're on either Monday through Saturday. And the reason for that, we're both in our 80s, and we just feel a little bit more safer doing it at that time. But the other part of it is I want to say good morning not only to you all, but to all those that are watching out there as we are streaming, because there's probably more of you out there than there are here, which is what typically happens on Sunday. So please, all of you, I'm talking to everyone. I'm here to make a confession. Father just told you that I'm responsible for a very gracious and unforgiving error, but I'm asking and confessing and asking for forgiveness. And I'm doing like the first Christians did, because I don't know if you all know this, but the first confessions were not made to priests, although the priest was present. They were made to the entire congregation. And I've been in a church at one time in my life where we all did that. We stood up in front of everyone, so I am confessing. Now, let me tell you how it all got started. It all got started because much of what we know about Orthodoxy got lost in the last 1,200 years for a lot of reasons, and I don't have time to go into them, but that's a fascinating study. But I'll quickly tell you what the error is, ask for forgiveness, and then tell you how we found out the truth. What happened is that up until, as Father said, up until the early 70s, every parish, every Greek Orthodox parish, and there were very few other Orthodox parishes in the country, but they too were doing dues. And dues was a set amount. His parish was cheap, $100. The cathedral was $200. Now, you might say, well, $200, well, $200 today is over $1,100. If you think about how money has changed, Father talked about how retirement's changed. Well, right now, the people were paying equivalent to $1,100 in order to be a member in the cathedral in the 70s. I was elected to the parish council in the 70s, in the mid-70s, and the first thing they asked me to do, why me? I have no idea. I could guess that, but they asked me to start a stewardship program. We didn't know of any other Greek parish in the country that had a stewardship program at that time. I had to start looking at materials. And there was not a single thing in English in the Orthodox Church on stewardship. Not a single thing. No hint other than some hints from the Bible, from the New Testament, and somewhat the Old Testament. Unfortunately, the Old Testament took us in the wrong direction, and that's another story for another day. What did I do? I turned to the Protestants, because the Catholics didn't have anything either. I turned to the Protestants, and we took many things from them, some good, but two things we took turned out to be wrong, very wrong. First of all, we said stewardship is to support the parish, support the church. You all heard that. In fact, most everybody thinks that's the primary purpose. The second thing is, we took the idea of making an annual pledge. And that pledge, frankly, in many parishes, was to the parish, not to God. In our parish, it was to God, but for most of you, because we record it in the church, you still think it's to the parish. So in all the cases, you come to the impression that stewardship is for the parish and not for your faith. Unfortunately, I apologize and ask forgiveness, because that's indeed totally wrong. In fact, stewardship, when it was created in the church, was entirely for a different purpose. And Father gave a slight overview to it, but I'm going to be more succinct. And the question is, how do we know that? Well, Father is an example, and Father Michael is an example. And many other Orthodox young people are examples, women as well as men. But also, there were Catholics and Protestants, all somehow in the 90s it tended to start as a grassroots and really has bloomed into this century of people who are Christians who want to know the truth about their faith. And what did they do? Well, Father already knew it, but the rest of them learned biblical Greek. More importantly, learned to read it than to speak it. In fact, when they do speak it, they probably speak it with a terrible accent. But they learned biblical Greek, and they went and read the original documents, particularly of the first 400 years, as Father mentioned. And they found out the truths, and they were so impressed with it that many of them translated it. And with the second major event in the 90s, with the internet, they made it available for all of us. Unfortunately, many of us weren't beginning to use it, so it started to appear in the books, mostly in this century, and a lot of the writing just in the last 10 years. And to be perfectly honest, even though Father kept hinting at it in the last 10 years in his classes, he'll tell you, when I emailed him, it was a Protestant professor who wrote in a book, in a group that we're using here in the parish, the true meaning of stewardship, and that's when I really turned around and I started piecing it together. Father talked about Acts. The other one I'll submit to you if you really want to find the other part. James, in quote, the brother of Christ, and it might be a stepbrother or it might be a cousin. But anyway, it's a close kin of Christ, wrote the epistle, and the rest of the story that puts it together is firmly in Acts. In St. James' epistle, because he talks about if you truly have the faith, it is your actions. And what are the actions? The actions are prayer, they are fasting, they are attending church, they are participating in communion, they're participating in unction, they're participating in confession, and yes, and doing stewardship. Stewardship was there at the beginning. It is one of those same things. And what happens when you do those things, God gives you grace. And I'm going to use a vernacular. I apologize. But it's like a force be given to you so that something happens and changes in you. And that action brings about many other things. It brings about several things, but three I'm going to emphasize. As a result of that grace, we become a part of a process of growing closer to Christ. In some places in the New Testament, and people have written about becoming a friend of Christ, developing that kind of warm, personal relationship with Christ. Another part of it is we develop as Father said, agape, we develop a loving relationship with all the people we encounter, not just our close friends, but we develop a totally different relationship to humanity. And then the third one, we develop true humility. Now, humility isn't just appearing humble in front of others. In fact, some of the humility is false humility for a personal effect. But what the subtle meaning behind humility is that we understand God's in charge and we're following His will. So the basic thing, those three things come out of that. And the more we do all those things, the more that takes place. And stewardship is just one of those things that gives us this grace for those things to grow. Now, as Father said, I want to talk about the two aspects of God's blessings. But I want to go to the sparrow first. The sparrow, we said, we should trust that God's going to meet our needs just like the sparrow. The sparrow knows that the sparrow's going to be fed. However, the sparrow has to do something. What does the sparrow have to do? Go look for it. You can't just sit there and wait. Now, that sparrow can generalize to all animals. All animals have to act in order to receive God's blessings. And therefore, those of us that act, we think everything we get, we did it. We got to act. But we act in concert, in synergy with God. And the more we act with synergy with God, not only do we receive the blessings of the things we need, but we receive a surplus. Now, I'm going to talk about two parts of it. The first part is the essential part. Trust in God, we're going to receive our needs. And the vast majority of us are going to get an excess. Now, Father talked about the rich man. If you read throughout the whole New Testament, Christ talks about the hypocrites the most. And I'm not going to deal with hypocrites today. But he talked about the problem of the rich man second most. And the rich man, as Father said, has a deciding point. We all have a deciding point. Now, I'm going to take what Father uses as an analogy as our retirement. Now, if we want a retirement that is luxurious, you're going down the other path. You're going a path away from God. What Christ is trying to tell us when he's teaching us, we have a choice. We can work in concert with God, or we can go away from God and have our life fall away. And that's the choice the rich man has. And when a rich man chooses me first, my luxuries first, then this whole thing is falling apart. Now, what does the church say that this is all for? This excess is where the name comes, stewardship. Stewards. We are stewards. Now, let me tell you how the church first started. The church didn't need any salaries. Everybody was so engrossed in their faith. They were Christian every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so infused in their faith that everybody was working within the faith. Nobody needed salaries. They didn't need facilities. They used homes. They used the synagogue. They used whatever other spaces, and in some cases they used the catacombs. And I'm not being facetious, but they didn't need utilities. They didn't need landscape. They didn't need all these things. They didn't need materials. They didn't need paper supplies. They didn't need all these other things. So, what was this excess for? We were stewards to use it for those in need. And there are two kinds of needs. There are needs of people to need things in order to survive. And there are those that are around us that need help to find God and to grow in God. And this was for the Christians to help in both those things. Not just the physical and health needs of people, but to help them grow spiritually. And that's where the tie-in is to the church and the faith. We're helping each other with these things. Now I'll go one step further and then I'll close with this. That our surplus of things means we also have a surplus of talent and time. Because if we're able with our time and talents and God working with us, we can get more, then we don't need all of that time and talent just for us. We now can apply it to helping others as well. Not just our things, not just our treasures. Today, not just our money, but our time and talents. Now, here's the beauty of the whole thing. We said God gives grace when we give things out of our stewardship. But we do our prayer, we do our giving, we do our fasting in private. But when we give our time and talent, other people see it. And they know, and Father alluded to it, they know that we're doing this out of love of God and out of our stewardship of our time and talents. When you do that, the blessing of God is even more because it's now public. And you now are serving for a model in your family. You're serving a model for your friends. And you're actually serving as a model for the whole world around you. So the whole thing, the whole stewardship started as a movement in the church, along with prayer and fasting and so forth, through which we grow grace so that we can grow closer to Christ and grow closer to our fellow men. And all this leads to what? Our life in eternity. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you very much.